The Grand Plan. The Exratian High Command War Room buzzed with anticipation, its crystalline walls reflecting the bioluminescent forms of assembled council members. Admiral Zor's translucent appendages quivered as he addressed the gathering, their bodies casting an eerie green glow across the chamber. Fellow council members, he gurgled through respiratory filters, for too long we have watched these humans. He spat the word like a particularly nasty form of space algae. These bipedal menaces have expanded across 17 solar systems in mere decades. Their infectious form of trade agreements and cultural exchange programs threatens the very fabric of our galactic order. A chorus of agreeing bubbles rose from the assembled aliens. High Scientist Yax bobbed nervously in her suspension tank. But Admiral, our previous attempts to contain them have all failed spectacularly. Need I remind everyone of the Martian debacle? The chamber fell silent. Nobody wanted to remember how humanity had turned their perfectly orchestrated invasion into an entertainment broadcast they called reality TV. This time, Admiral Zor's voice took on an insufferably smug tone. We have something different. Something elegant. He gestured with 3 of his 12 appendages, and a holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber. Behold, Operation Grape Expectations. The silence that followed was broken only by Chief Strategist Kip's barely suppressed snort, which he quickly disguised as a filter malfunction. They have this beverage, Zor continued, choosing to ignore the interruption, called wine. Our analysis shows that 38.2% of their diplomatic functions, business deals, and social gatherings involve this particular fermented fruit juice. We have developed a compound that, when introduced to their wine supply, will render them. He paused for dramatic effect, completely unable to engage in complex negotiations. The council members wiggled their sensory tentacles in appreciative applause. None of them noticed High Scientist Yax's quiet muttering about humans' peculiar resistance to what should have been lethal substances in previous experiments. The compound is already being distributed, Zor announced triumphantly. Soon, very soon, the humans will learn their place in the galactic order. And the best part? His bioluminescence pulsed with pride. They won't even know what hit them until it's too late. The war room erupted in celebratory phosphorescence, their bodies glowing like a disco ball made of jellyfish. In their excitement, not one of them thought to question why a species capable of surviving in space would be brought low by spiked grape juice. High Scientist Yax retreated to her private laboratory, her tentacles wrapping around various scientific instruments as she conducted one final analysis of the compound. The results made her inner lights flicker with concern. According to her calculations, the compound would indeed affect human brain chemistry, just not in the way Admiral Zor expected. She pulled up the classified files on human alcohol tolerance, noted their peculiar ability to not only survive but thrive on substances that would kill most species, and added a new entry to her research log. Note to self, recommend immediate study of human liver function. Their detoxification capabilities defy known biochemistry. Meanwhile, on Earth, the first batch of contaminated wine was making its way through customs. The Exratian agents, disguised as what they believed to be inconspicuous Earth creatures, had successfully infiltrated major wineries across the globe. In Bordeaux, a 6-foot-tall, slightly luminescent peacock had become something of a local celebrity. In Napa Valley, a group of suspiciously tall penguins had somehow gotten themselves hired as tour guides. The humans, true to form, didn't question any of this. They simply added the glowing peacock to their wine tours and praised the penguins' committed method acting in their Yelp reviews. As the sun set over Earth's major wine regions, Admiral Zor watched from orbit with growing satisfaction. Everything was proceeding according to plan. In just a few weeks, the Interstellar Cultural Exchange and Trade Summit would begin, and with it, the downfall of human diplomatic superiority. What he didn't notice was a small alert blinking on one of the monitoring stations. Human purchases of something called the good stuff, for when the aliens finally show up, had increased by 500%. The computer had filed this under, probably not important, a classification that would prove to be somewhat of an understatement. Beneath the streets of Geneva, Switzerland, in a climate-controlled bunker that officially didn't exist, humanity's finest vintages were being carefully stored alongside bottles with labels that would have made Admiral Zor's bioluminescence fade to pure white with terror. The humans were preparing for a party, and they had centuries of experience in turning potentially lethal substances into social lubricants. The stage was set, the players were in position, and somewhere in the vast expanse of space, Murphy's Law was having a good chuckle at the Exratian's expense. The implementation. Operation Grape Expectations unfolded across Earth's wine regions with all the subtlety of a supernova. The Exratian infiltration units, masters of overthinking simple problems, had developed what they considered foolproof disguises. They hadn't counted on humanity's remarkable ability to accept the absurd as entertainment. In the Champagne region of France, a group of what appeared to be geometric flamingos had established themselves as performance artists. Local vintners had actually started paying them to stand in their vineyards, claiming they added avant-garde authenticity to their wine tours. The flamingo's habit of dipping scientific instruments into wine vats was praised as a bold commentary on modern viticulture. Technical analyst MIP, monitoring from orbit, watched in growing confusion as humans began posting selfies with their agents. "Sir," he reported to Admiral Zor, "the humans have started a social media challenge called Spot the Space Flamingo. They're offering prizes for the best photos." "Impossible." Zor's bioluminescence flickered with irritation. "Our disguises are perfect. We studied their Earth creatures extensively." "Sir," MIP hesitated, "about that, it seems our research team may have used children's picture books as reference material. Specifically, something called My First Geometric Animals." In Tuscany, the situation wasn't much better. The Exratian agents there had chosen to disguise themselves as what they believed to be inconspicuous grape harvesting machinery. The result was a collection of walking contraptions that looked like Salvador Dali had designed agricultural equipment while on a particularly creative streak. The Italians, rather than questioning these improbable machines, had declared them art installations, and started charging extra for tours that included what they called I Robot della Vendemmia, the harvest robots. Someone had even started a wine label featuring the machine's likeness. High scientist Yax, monitoring the operation from her laboratory, was developing a concerning twitch in her third eye stalk. Her latest analysis of the compound's interaction with human biochemistry suggested something entirely unexpected. Instead of inhibiting complex thought, it appeared to be having the opposite effect. Humans exposed to the compound were showing increased creativity, enhanced social bonding, and an alarming tendency to start philosophical discussions about the nature of existence. "Admiral," she tried to report her findings, "I believe we may have inadvertently created success." Zor interrupted, his appendages wiggling with excitement. "Our agents report 97% saturation of Earth's wine supply. The humans suspect nothing." Yax's tentacles drooped. "Sir, about the compound's effects." "Not now, Yax. We're about to begin Phase 2. Phase 2, as it turned out, involved infiltrating what humans called wine-tasting events. The Exratians had concluded these were some form of military training exercises, given the precise protocols involved and the mysterious human practice of spitting out perfectly good wine. In California's Napa Valley, a group of Exratian agents disguised as extremely tall penguins had become minor celebrities in the wine-tasting circuit. Their unique approach to wine appreciation, which involved complex scientific instruments and occasional bioluminescent displays, was being hailed as revolutionary by wine critics. The Geometric Penguin Collective brings a fascinating postmodern perspective to traditional wine tasting, wrote one influential critic. Their insistence on measuring the wine's quantum resonance before tasting adds an intriguing scientific dimension to the experience. And their occasional glowing is a brilliant commentary on humanity's relationship with artificial light. The penguins had even been invited to judge several prestigious wine competitions, where their completely random selections based on incomprehensible alien criteria had somehow resulted in them discovering several previously overlooked excellent vintages. Meanwhile, in the secret bunkers beneath Geneva, humanity's representatives were preparing for the upcoming interstellar summit with what could only be described as gleeful anticipation. The hidden vaults contained not only the finest wines from across Earth but also an impressive collection of what humans euphemistically called the strong stuff. Professor Lin Chen, Earth's leading xenobiochemist, had been monitoring the Exratians' activities with growing amusement. Her lab had identified the compound in the wine almost immediately, but after analyzing its effects, she had recommended a rather unconventional response: do nothing. Let them think they're succeeding, she had told the United Earth Council. In fact, I suggest we appear to drink more wine than usual. Make sure our alien friends think their plan is working perfectly. The Council had readily agreed, particularly after Professor Chen explained the compound's actual effects. Rather than inhibiting complex thought, it appeared to enhance humans' already remarkable ability to metabolize alcohol while simultaneously boosting their social capabilities. Besides, Chen had added with a mischievous glint in her eye, wait until they see what happens when we introduce them to what my grandmother calls the real drinks. As the date of the interstellar summit approached, the Exratians grew increasingly confident in their plan's success. They had successfully infiltrated every major wine-producing region on Earth, contaminated nearly the entire wine supply, and none of their agents had been exposed, or so they thought. What they didn't realize was that humans had documented every single one of their covert operations, primarily through Instagram and TikTok. The hashtag #SpaceWine hashtag was trending globally, and someone had even created a mobile app to track sightings of the artistic alien animals. The humans had turned the entire operation into a form of interactive entertainment, complete with merchandise, social media challenges, and a documentary series in production. They were, in fact, having the time of their lives playing along with what they assumed was either an elaborate marketing campaign or the most sophisticated performance art project in history. As Admiral Zor reviewed the final preparations for the summit, his bioluminescence pulsing with anticipation, he remained blissfully unaware of one crucial fact: humans had centuries of experience in turning potentially lethal substances into party drinks. The wine was just the beginning of their chemical adventures in recreational beverages. The stage was set for a diplomatic summit that would go down in galactic history, though not for the reasons the Exratians intended. In the depths of space, Murphy's Law was warming up for what promised to be its greatest performance yet. The summit begins. The Geneva International Convention Center had been transformed for the Interstellar Cultural Exchange and Trade Summit. Holographic displays flickered alongside classical Earth artwork, creating what the event planners called a perfect fusion of terrestrial and extraterrestrial aesthetics. The Exratians called it visual chaos, but they were too focused on their impending triumph to care. Admiral Zor, positioned in what he believed to be an inconspicuous observation post, actually a rather obvious spot behind a potted plant, watched as delegates from across the galaxy arrived. His bioluminescence dimmed to maintain stealth, though several passing humans complimented what they assumed was a creative lighting installation. The Aeoran delegation arrived first, their crystalline bodies refracting light in complex patterns. They were followed by the gaseous Zenithians in their ornately decorated containment suits, and the quantum probability waves that might or might not have been the quantum collective's representatives. Status report, Zor whispered into his communication device, trying to look casual while his tentacles twisted with anticipation. All wine being served contains the compound, technical analyst MIP reported from his disguise as what he thought was a convincing replica of Earth furniture. It wasn't, he looked like a chair designed by someone who had only had chairs described to them via interpretive dance. The human hosts began circulating, carrying trays of contaminated wine. Professor Lin Chen, leading Earth's diplomatic team, approached the Aeoran delegation with a vintage red that made Admiral Zor's inner lights pulse with triumph. "This is a particularly special vintage," she announced, her voice carrying across the chamber. "We've noticed it has some interesting new qualities lately." Several humans nearby chuckled, and Zor could have sworn some of them winked in his direction. The first hour passed in a blur of introductions, small talk, and increasingly empty wine glasses. Admiral Zor watched with mounting confusion as the humans showed no signs of diplomatic impairment. If anything, they seemed to be getting more effective. In one corner, a human trade negotiator was simultaneously conducting complex negotiations with 3 different species while doing something called juggling with empty wine glasses. Nearby, Earth's quantum physics team was explaining 11-dimensional string theory to the quantum collective using what appeared to be a chopstick and several olive garnishes as visual aids. High Scientist Yax, Zor hissed into his communicator, explain this. They've consumed enough of the compound to destabilize a small moon's orbit. Why aren't they losing cognitive function? Well, sir, Yax's voice carried a note of scientific fascination mixed with existential dread. I've been trying to tell you. The compound appears to be having some unexpected effects when combined with human biochemistry. Instead of inhibiting complex thought, it seems to be. She was interrupted by Professor Chen climbing onto a table, an impressive feat given she was wearing formal diplomatic attire and holding a wine glass that never spilled a drop. Distinguished guests. Chen called out, her voice clear and steady despite having consumed what Yax's instruments indicated was an alarming amount of contaminated wine. We've so enjoyed sharing our diplomatic beverage of choice with you. But now, as we move into the evening's serious negotiations, perhaps you'd like to try what we humans call the good stuff. Admiral Zor's bioluminescence flickered in confusion. The good stuff. On cue, servers wheeled out carts laden with bottles of various shapes and sizes. Zor's universal translator began processing the labels: single malt scotch, aged 25 years, premium vodka, distilled 9 times, Everclear, warning, flammable. You see, Chen continued, now balancing perfectly on one foot atop the table while giving what appeared to be a lecture on human biochemistry, wine is just our starter drink. What you're about to experience is the result of thousands of years of humans asking ourselves one simple question: how can we make it stronger? High Scientist Yax's instruments began registering alarm as she analyzed the contents of the new bottles. Sir, she reported, her voice shaking, these beverages contain enough ethanol to power a small spacecraft. The humans are proposing to drink them. Voluntarily. The gathered aliens watched in horror and fascination as humans began enthusiastically explaining various spirits to their interstellar guests. A biochemist was describing vodka as basically rocket fuel you can drink, while another diplomat was demonstrating something called shots to a deeply concerned group of Zenithians. It's quite simple, the diplomat explained, arranging small glasses in a row. First, you add salt to your hand, yes, like that. Then you have the shot, bite the lime, and slam the glass down. We invented this tradition because, well, actually, no one remembers why. We just know it's fun. Admiral Zor watched his carefully orchestrated plan crumble as humans began introducing their alien guests to increasingly potent forms of alcohol. The Aorans were particularly fascinated by something called blue curacao, possibly because it matched their crystalline structure's natural resonance frequency. In the corner, Professor Chen was now explaining the concept of proof to a horrified group of Exratian officers. You take the percentage and double it, she said cheerfully. So this little beauty is 190 proof, or 95% pure ethanol. We use it to clean engine parts sometimes, but it also makes an excellent party starter. But how are you still functioning? One of the officers asked, their bioluminescence having faded to a pale, sickly green. Chen laughed. Oh, this is nothing. Wait until we break out my grandmother's special baijiu. Now that's what we call a diplomatic incident in a bottle. As the evening progressed, it became increasingly clear that Operation Grape Expectations had not just failed, it had backfired spectacularly. The humans were using their contaminated wine as a prelude to introducing the galaxy to the full spectrum of Earth's alcoholic achievements. And somewhere in the depths of space, Murphy's Law was mixing itself a martini and preparing for Act 4. The Revelation. The Geneva summit had devolved into what humans called a proper party, and what the Exratian High Command was rapidly classifying as a diplomatic catastrophe. Their carefully orchestrated plan to undermine human negotiation abilities had instead unleashed what appeared to be humanity's secret diplomatic superpower, the ability to turn any potentially lethal substance into a social bonding experience. Admiral Zor watched in horror as Professor Chen, now standing atop a table made from recycled spacecraft parts, conducted what she called a brief history of human intoxicants, a practical demonstration. His bioluminescence had faded to such a pale shade of green that several concerned humans had tried to change his batteries, assuming he was some sort of malfunctioning party decoration. "You see," Chen explained to the assembled aliens, her voice carrying the precise clarity of someone who had transcended ordinary sobriety, "humans have a unique relationship with ethanol. While most species evolved to avoid toxic substances, we decided to make friends with them." High Scientist Yax's monitoring equipment was registering unprecedented levels of both alcohol and coherent diplomatic discourse. The humans had somehow turned their contaminated wine into a launching point for introducing the galaxy to increasingly potent forms of Earth spirits, each with its own elaborate consumption ritual. "This," announced a human diplomat to a group of fascinated Aeorans, "is called a Long Island iced tea. It contains 5 different spirits, none of which is tea. We invented it because sometimes you want to question your life choices very efficiently." The quantum collective, typically existing in a state of probability waves, had become unexpectedly tangible after something called tequila shots. They were now teaching quantum entanglement principles to a group of humans using shot glasses as visual aids, their usual uncertainty temporarily replaced by enthusiastic certainty about everything. Technical analyst MIP, still poorly disguised as abstract furniture, sent a panicked report to Admiral Zor, "Sir, the humans are proposing a toast with something they call moonshine. Initial analysis suggests it's basically portable plasma fuel. They're drinking it anyway." It was at this moment that Professor Chen decided to address the elephant in the room, or more accurately, the bioluminescent aliens poorly hiding behind potted plants and pretending to be furniture. "My dear Exratian friends," she called out, somehow maintaining perfect balance atop her table while holding a glass of something that was literally glowing, "did you really think we wouldn't notice you tampering with our wine?" The room fell silent, except for the sound of several Zenithians adjusting their containment suits' atmosphere mix to handle the secondhand fumes from a nearby absinthe demonstration. Admiral Zor's bioluminescence flickered in panic as Chen continued, "We detected your compound the moment it entered our wine supply. Quite clever, really, attempting to use our own social lubricant against us. But you made one crucial mistake." "We did?" Zor found himself asking, his cover thoroughly blown. "You assumed wine was the strongest thing we drink." Chen laughed, the sound echoing through the suddenly quiet chamber. "That's adorable. Wine is what we give teenagers at family dinners to teach them responsibility. Would you like to see what we drink when we're seriously negotiating?" The Exratian delegation watched in mounting horror as humans began breaking out bottles that made their previous offerings look like mineral water. Each came with its own warning label, most of which included the word "flammable" at least once. "This," Chen announced, holding up a bottle of clear liquid that several scientific instruments nearby were registering as a potential biohazard, "is what my grandmother makes in her basement. We use it to strip paint, power small vehicles, and occasionally, settle interstellar trade disputes." High Scientist Yax's instruments were reporting numbers that couldn't possibly be correct. "Sir," she transmitted to Zor, her voice carrying a mix of terror and scientific fascination, "they're not just tolerating our compound, they're metabolizing it to enhance their cognitive functions. It's as if their entire species evolved specifically to turn toxins into diplomatic advantages." The revelation of the Exratians' plot should have been a diplomatic catastrophe. Instead, the humans had somehow turned it into an impromptu masterclass on Earth's contributions to recreational chemistry. Various alien species were now being introduced to concepts like beer pong, keg stands, and something called spring break that several experienced diplomats warned should never be explained to the wider galaxy. The thing about humans, Chen explained to the thoroughly demoralized Exratian delegation, is that we don't just survive things that should kill us, we turn them into party games. Did you know we originally developed these drinks to kill harmful bacteria in our water supply? Now we use them to make karaoke seem like a good idea. As if on cue, someone had set up a karaoke machine, and a group of humans was teaching the Xenithians the lyrics to "Don't Stop Believin'," a task complicated by the fact that Xenithians communicated primarily through atmospheric pressure changes. Admiral Zor's carefully orchestrated plan had not just failed, it had evolved into what humans called an absolute rager. The Exratian compound, rather than inhibiting human diplomatic capabilities, had somehow catalyzed the largest interspecies cultural exchange in galactic history. And in the corner, Professor Chen was now explaining the concept of hair of the dog to a horrified group of alien biochemists, while casually mixing something she called a prairie oyster, a hangover cure that several species categorized as a weapon of mass destruction. The night was far from over, and Murphy's Law was mixing itself another cocktail, preparing for the grand finale. The aftermath. The morning after the interstellar summit dawned bright and merciless over Geneva. The Exratian High Command found themselves in an emergency session, though emergency slouch might have been a more accurate description. Admiral Zor's bioluminescence had dimmed to the approximate shade of a forgotten glow stick, while High Scientist Yax reviewed the previous night's data with what could only be described as scientific PTSD. Let me understand this correctly, First Minister Cax transmitted through their neural network, trying to minimize painful sound waves. Not only did Operation Grape expectations fail, but the humans turned it into a marketing opportunity. Affirmative, Zor mumbled, his tentacles wrapped around a cup of what humans called black coffee, a substance they'd recommended for his condition. They're calling it space wine. Pre-orders have already exceeded 10 million units. The holographic displays showed footage from the previous night's events. The Quantum Collective had achieved unprecedented stability after something called body shots, leading to breakthrough discussions on unified field theory. The Aeorans had discovered that certain Earth spirits made their crystalline forms refract light in previously impossible ways, spawning an entire new art movement overnight. Meanwhile, Professor Chen's impromptu lecture on human recreational chemistry through the ages had been archived as required viewing at several prestigious galactic universities. Her demonstration of various Earth drinking customs had led to 3 new fields of xenoanthropological study and what the Xenithians were calling the best party in recorded history. The humans, High Scientist Yax reported, her tentacles trembling slightly, have evolved beyond our understanding. They don't just survive toxic substances, they weaponize them into social catalysts. Last night, they negotiated 17 major trade deals, solved 3 long-standing territorial disputes, and invented a new form of faster-than-light travel theory, all while teaching the Xenithians how to perform something called the Macarena. The security footage showed humans introducing increasingly potent beverages to their alien guests, each with its own elaborate ritual. The Aeoran delegation had become particularly fond of something called Jaeger bombs, claiming the combination of liquids matched their crystalline resonance frequencies perfectly. The Quantum Collective had achieved quantum coherence through synchronized tequila shots. But perhaps most concerning, Yax continued, pulling up her latest analysis, is what happened when our compound interacted with human biochemistry. Instead of inhibiting their functions, it enhanced them. They've already patented the formula as a new party drink called Alien After Hours. The truth is out there, and it's delicious. The marketing materials featured the Exratians' geometric flamingos and surveillance penguins prominently. Someone had even created a cocktail called the Clumsy Infiltrator, served in a glass shaped like a poorly disguised alien. Professor Chen had submitted a paper to the Galactic Scientific Assembly titled Competitive Evolution of Human Alcohol Tolerance, How Earth Turned Poison into Diplomacy. It was already being hailed as a seminal work in multiple fields. We've received a formal communication from Earth's Diplomatic Corps, technical analyst MIP reported, still slightly listing to one side from his attempt to blend in with Earth furniture. They're thanking us for our innovative contribution to interspecies relations and have invited us to be honored guests at next year's summit. They're calling it the mixology of peace. The humans had somehow turned a failed attempt at diplomatic sabotage into a galaxy-wide cultural phenomenon. Bars across 17 systems were already advertising authentic Earth drinking games night, though most species wisely opted for non-alcoholic versions after several unfortunate incidents involving attempted keg stands. Perhaps, First Minister Cax suggested delicately, we should consider a different approach to human relations. They're organizing something called an Intergalactic Beer Festival next month, MIP added. Apparently, we're the guests of honor. They're even naming a craft brewery after us, Failed Invasion Alesh. Every beer has a story. In the end, the Exratian High Command had no choice but to accept their new role as unwitting catalysts for improved galactic relations. Their attempted sabotage had instead spawned a cultural exchange program beyond anything they could have imagined, or prevented. Professor Chen's grandmother's basement brewery had been designated a site of special scientific interest by the Galactic Council. Her notorious Baijio was being studied by xenochemists who couldn't quite believe their readings. 3 separate species had requested the recipe, though Chen warned that her grandmother would take it to her grave, just like she took the location of her second still. As for the Exratians, they found themselves inadvertently becoming the galaxy's leading experts in human recreational biochemistry, a field they'd created entirely by accident. Their research into human alcohol tolerance had opened up entirely new areas of xenobiology, though most of their papers included the phrase, "We still don't understand how they survived this," at least once. Admiral Zor, nursing his first and last hangover, finally understood humanity's true superpower. They didn't just survive adversity, they turned it into a party. His next report to the High Command was succinct: suggestion, never try to outdrink a species that invented drinking games as a survival strategy. And somewhere in the vast expanse of space, Murphy's Law ordered another round, content with a job well done. The end.